We woke up Sunday morning to the sad news that in the last 24 hours, 10 IDF soldiers had been killed in action in several different battles scattered throughout the Gaza Strip. Most of these casualties came from a single event, however, when an engineering APC that they were traveling in was hit during intense fighting in the southern city of Rafah in the Gaza Strip. Fierce battles also raged in other cities in the central part of the Gaza Strip and in the north. Hezbollah is threatening to escalate their already intense rate of fire into Israel. The coming weeks are going to be decisive in the Gaza Strip and possibly in other places in Israel. Let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on the 254th day of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and the Iranian-backed proxy militias that include the Houthis and several other armed groups in Syria and Iraq. The deadly incident in Rafah, which claimed the lives of 8 soldiers, occurred at 5:15 a.m. on Saturday. According to the IDF spokesperson's unit, a combat engineering unit attached to the Givati Brigade had been heavily engaged with Hamas terrorists in the city, which had resulted in the elimination of around 50 terrorists. Some of the soldiers were in the process of withdrawing to a rest area, and as they drove past the Tel El Sultan refugee camp, one armored personnel carrier was hit with an improvised explosive device. There was no firing prior to the explosion, and it is still unclear if this IED had been placed in the spot and remotely detonated, or if a terrorist came alongside and attached the device to the APC undetected. In any event, the vehicle, which was the 5th in a column of 6, suffered massive damage from the blast and caught fire, which is very unusual since this vehicle is designed to not catch fire. But the initial report says that the IED might have set off secondary explosions of ammunition inside the vehicle, and it burned for a long time, making it impossible for rescue teams to approach for almost 2 hours. After the fire was finally put out, the vehicle was towed to a safe location and a search was made of the area by drones and other means to try and find the terrorists who had set off the IED. But they managed to escape this time and will have to fight them another day. Meanwhile, another tank ran over an IED, an explosive device, on Saturday in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. This attack resulted in the deaths of 2 IDF reservists and the severe wounding of another 2. Lessons are being learned from these incidents, and some analysts believe that they might signal a shift in the fighting to an insurgency like what the Americans faced in Iraq in the mid-2000s. In fact, the IDF believes that we are looking at Hamas 2.0, a shift from the sophisticated light infantry force that they were able to deploy for the most part of the 8 months of this war to the more traditional guerrilla army that they always were. The sophisticated military formations Hamas threw at the IDF from October 7th until recently have been almost entirely dismantled and destroyed, leaving only loosely organized squads and even individual terrorists, but these small armed gangs can still do plenty of damage simply by fighting a war of attrition that prevents stability. Entering the 9th month of the war, one needs to understand the logic of Hamas in particular and the behavior of the Palestinians in general. The Gazan public suffers but does not renounce Hamas. Sadly, Hamas is correct in thinking that it can continue the war of attrition that will claim as many victims as possible from the Palestinians, destroying and ruining the fabric of life in the Gaza Strip. We are fighting against an extreme ideological organization that has embedded itself into society and infiltrated people's minds. Hamas can only be dealt with by taking psychological control of the territory and keeping control until the terrorist organization and the supporting civil infrastructure have been completely uprooted. With that in mind, the purpose of the fighting in Rafah and cities in the central district of the Gaza Strip is to destroy the military capabilities of the remaining Hamas formations in these areas. At the same time, the IDF took control of the Philadelphia corridor that separates Gaza from Egypt, closed the Rafah crossing through which many explosive devices were smuggled into Gaza, and is now working to damage the smuggling tunnels that were dug under the border. Blocking the smuggling tunnels is essential in order to isolate the strip and cut off the supply of weapons and rockets that endanger the security of the residents of the State of Israel. As the IDF gains tactical experience, lessons are learned, and the forces are currently operating with methods developed during the fighting, are operating both above and below the ground and damaging Hamas infrastructure. As I've mentioned before, the lessons the IDF learns will be passed along through our friends and allies so they can apply them to future battles in similar terrain and conditions against other terrorist groups. Another thing that's important to keep in mind is that the fighting in Rafah is fundamentally different from the fighting in the north of the Gaza Strip. This is because of the proximity to the Egyptian border, the density of the buildings, and the desire not to harm those not involved. IDF soldiers operate with a method of raiding Hamas targets using reduced counter-fire and airstrikes. As a result, the operation takes more time and poses greater risks to our forces. However, the operation in Rafah, led by the 162nd Division, is progressing at a pace that will allow the end of the intense fighting within a few weeks. The plan is for the IDF to then switch to operations involving intelligence-based raids to destroy the residential capacity of Hamas operating in the field as an organized guerrilla force throughout the entire Gaza Strip. Examples of this kind of operation have already been seen, such as the raid several weeks ago on the Hamas fighters inside the Shifa hospital in Gaza City. Also, this day of intense fighting in the south allows the Israeli government to make a decision that the main arena is going to be the north, and will allow the IDF to prepare for a powerful action against Hezbollah organization in Lebanon. The coming weeks are going to be weeks of decisions. So please continue to pray for the peace of our soldiers, that they will be sent in peace and that they will return in peace to their families. Please share our videos on YouTube and subscribe to this YouTube channel so that together we can share the truth with anyone who wants to know what truly is happening in Israel. Shifting our attention once again to the northern border, Hezbollah announced over the weekend that it attacked a number of Air Force installations in Mount Meron in response to the assassination of Sami Abdallah Abu Talib in the village of Joya last week. The IDF spokesman said that 2 impacts were detected in the area of the base. There were no casualties and there was no damage to the unit's ability to function. Hours later, several Hezbollah drones landed in the Golan area of Western Galilee, resulting in yet another forest fire in the area. However, aside from trees, there are no casualties from these incidents, and the IDF stated that they are being investigated. In the shadow of the escalation in the northern border, Ibrahim El-Amin, the editor of the Lebanese newspaper El Akhbar, which is affiliated with Hezbollah, published an editorial on Saturday entitled "The Enemy's Complex Dilemma: How do we continue in Gaza and disrupt the Lebanese front?" The enemy, according to him, is us, Israel. And he seems to think that the main focus of the IDF will remain the Gaza Strip. However, if he's watching this video, I can tell him, and anyone else who might be interested, that large numbers of IDF troops and equipment are being moved to the northern part of Israel as we speak. Also, last night Israel carried out an unusual attack from the sea in the village of Janata, which is located north of Tyre. According to reports in Arabic, this was an attempt to assassinate a senior member of Hezbollah. Conflicting publications indicate potential targets for elimination, as well as wide range of between 10 and 30 casualties. This is a good place to mention that the Swords of Iron War has seen unprecedented cooperation between the IDF ground forces, the Air Force, and also the Navy. According to foreign publications, even before the ground maneuver inside the Gaza Strip began, the Navy used NLOS Spike missiles, Tammuz 5, that are manufactured by Rafah to strike known Hamas positions. The NLOS missile is part of the Spike missile and has accumulated thousands of operational launches in different operations and from different platforms, including naval vessels, helicopters, and ground vehicles. Getting back to last night's operation in Lebanon, it can be reported that it was a success, with the enemy forces being completely overwhelmed. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on the northern sector, and we ask you to help us by continuing to spread the truth, share, and follow us, and take an active part in spreading the truth by donating to this YouTube channel here in the donate button, or going to our website at www.tbn.org/Israel. I would like to conclude by paying my last respects to the heroes who fell defending the State of Israel, the fighters in the 601st Battalion of Utzva 401, who fell in the explosion of the APC in Rafah include Captain Vazim Mahmoud, 23 years old, from Bet Jan, Deputy Company Commander in the 601st Engineering Battalion, was killed in battle in the southern Gaza Strip. The head of the council paid tribute to him. Vazim was a lad, a member of a noble family. He insisted on serving and insisted on giving his all. With him were killed Sergeant Itai Amar, 19 years old, from Kochav Yair, Sergeant Eliyahu Moshe, Cymbalist, 21 years old, from Bet Shemesh, Sergeant Eazi Shaya Grover, 20 years old, from Tel Menashe, Sergeant Or Blumovich, 20 years old, from Pardes Chana, Karkur, Sergeant Stanislav Kostrev, 21 years old, from Ashdod. In addition, 2 more victims were killed in the event, whose names have not yet been released. The IDF spokesman this morning allowed the publication that Captain in Reserve Eitan Kapolovich, 28 years of age, from Jerusalem, and Sergeant Major in Reserve Ilon Weiss, 49 years of age, from Psagot, were killed in battle in the northern Gaza Strip. The 2 are fighters in the 129th Battalion of the 8th Brigade, and they were killed in an IED explosion on the tank in the Gaza City. May their memory be blessed, and please pray hard for their families, and pray for the defense and security of our IDF soldiers. This is very important. The war is still ongoing in the Gaza Strip, in the northern border with Hezbollah, and we need to stop this evil here in Israel before it spreads to the rest of the world. So please help us share the truth and help us in praying for the peace of Jerusalem.